Welcome to my latest diorama build, and I'm creating a scene from a favourite film of mine from the 1960s, Time Machine. I've bought the STL files from Gambody, and the results are as you see here. Some of the smaller parts I've printed more copies than I need, as I wasn't sure how they'll turn out. The STLs didn't come with supports, so I had to do those myself, and I'm very inexperienced at that. Basically use the auto setting. And it seems to have come out okay. This part here is a bit thin, and it's not quite right, but that goes in there, so it's not going to be seen really, so that's fine. These little cages, they're incredibly delicate as well. You see that? So I've got to be careful there. But straight off the printer, I haven't done any cleanup yet. It almost goes together just fine. So I'll just notice there's a little bit of a curve there, but that should be fine. This disc as well has got ever so slightly wonky, but good enough. That's the problem with resin printing. The parts can warp. But the parts I was most worried about were these bits, and they seem absolutely fine. So I think I'm good to go. With a little bit of cleanup, sanding away where the supports join, and a little bit of Vallejo plastic putty filling some gaps, I'm very quickly ready for some assembly and paint. I start the painting process by base coating the main colour. In this case, I'm doing all the mahogany bits, or at least I assume the wood used on the original is mahogany. It has that reddish look about it. Then I do the same with the rest of it, picking what I think is the main colour of the object and paint it slightly darker, so I can later dry brush a lighter version. So here I'm taking that lighter colour, in this case it's the leather parts of the seat, and dry brushing that colour with a little mini blender brush, and the result is fairly effective and super simple. A quick check to see if things still fit after they've had the paint added, and I can then start to glue the main components together, remembering to scrape off the paint where the glue will be applied. This main support thingy has some panel details and rivets, so I'm taking a much lighter colour and using the edge of the brush to run along the raised parts and edges. This picks the detail out and makes it a lot more obvious from a distance. This hub-like part came with two versions. Version 1 had the little glass panels separate, but I chose version 2 which had the whole thing solid, so I just printed the whole thing out in transparent resin, and now I'm just painting the parts that need to be opaque. I thought this a much easier option since I'm making such a small version of the Time Machine. All that's left to do now is final assembly and a bit of paint touch up, so small little montage and we're done. I need to plan out the size of the room by looking at stills from the film and estimating the size of the various bits of furniture, the square tiles and the windows of the conservatory in. So I grabbed myself a sheet of A4 and plotted things out. I was quite happy with this size, but I did need to make the room a lot deeper. When I put all the objects in, there wasn't enough room to walk around, and in the film you can clearly see there's plenty of space for the various characters to walk around. I'm constructing the walls of the diorama out of white foam board. This is the same stuff I've used before. I got it from an art supplier and it's a stronger version of the standard foam board. A lot more expensive, but I have a pile of it I'm not using. If that wasn't lying around, I'd just use standard foam board. It would be fine. So here it's just a simple matter of cutting to size, gluing together, and what I'm calling the conservatory end of the room, I'm going to construct that out of balsa wood. But first, let's get the foam board bit done. And now on to the conservatory side of the room, where I've decided to use balsa. But of course, I still haven't got myself some balsa cement. So this time I've decided to use super glue. Before I used tacky glue, but the dry time was just too slow. Although I will be using it where the balsa meets the foam board, as foam and super glue don't like each other. I haven't got any great plan how I'm doing this, just looking at the reference photos, cutting the balsa to rough size, glue it together and see what happens. And now the slightly more difficult part, the doors and windows. I'm still going to continue as I started and not plan it out on paper. I do know how many window panes I need for everything, so I'll make sure I get that right, but really just freestyle it, as it's quite straightforward. Just a series of cutting strips of balsa wood and gluing it all together. And I must say I'm loving the micro tips on the super glue bottles. Quite a few of you on a previous video suggested I get some of these micro tips, so thank you again. I've probably overdone it by buying 100 of them, as one does actually last quite a long time. They rarely block up, and if they do, it's a simple little trim and away you go again. The downside of using super glue for these little fiddly bits is you can't help getting it all over your fingers. I should be using rubber gloves, but I still can't find the box of 100 I bought ages ago, and I have a strong reluctance to go and buy some more. But I have ordered some balsa cement, as surely that's the best glue to use for balsa. It used to be when I was a kid, a long time ago. I have these leftover pieces of very thin foam that's foil backed. It's for some sort of insulation where you can't have anything thick. Not really sure where it came from, but it's very useful for lining the foam board and giving me a surface to scribe brick lines and some brick texture onto. So I'm just cutting it to shape and gluing it on. Job done. I was going to plonk the door on top of the foam, but I thought no, it'd be a better idea to set it in a little, so I removed the required rectangular foam and glued the door in. Now the reason for the foam was so I could sculpt in the brickwork, and now's the time to do it. I did toy with the idea of putting the brickwork on the foam before I glued it onto the walls, as it's easier access, but in the end I decided I'll just do the scribing while it's in place. Still not sure which would have been the best option. So I first scribe the brick lines in with a scalpel, then I use a 6H pencil to widen it all. To protect the foam, I give it several coats of diluted PVA glue, 50-50 water and glue, and a good helping of acrylic white paint, and brush it all in. And when I had finished, I had lots of the mixture left over, so I thought, why not put it all over the balsa as well? Give it a little bit of protection, and the woodwork here is white anyway. And now on to the checker flooring. I had choices how I was going to do these tiles. I could do the same as the brickwork, although I couldn't really, because I don't think I had enough of that foam left over. But I've gone with laser cut cardboard squares, which I'm going to paint up before installing them, which I think will be the most efficient way of doing it. No hassle trying not to paint over the lines. Now I must say the laser cutter is my favourite tool, even more than the 3D printer, which is saying something, although in reality I couldn't be without either. And I'm very curious, what's your must-have tool? Am I missing out on something? Please comment below. While I'm waiting for the tiles to dry, I thought it a good time to spread the brick walls with acrylic paste. This is to simulate the grouting, so you just have to spread it around with a small putty knife and then try to scrape it all off, and what you're left with is the paste sitting in the brick lines. I just thought I should paint the door before I positioned the tiles. Maybe I should have painted the door before I put it in the wall, but hey, didn't think of it then. The trickiest part of laying the tiles is by the conservatory end, as there's no straight line on the wall and I have to modify each tile to fit, so I thought that was a good place to start and get it over with. In the process of laying the tiles, I hit a problem, and that was the glue made the tiles curl up at the edges. So I had to lay them in lots of short stages so I could weigh them down while they dried, which took up to an hour for each strip. Bit of a pain, but it worked. Now I finally got the bare bones of the room finished, I can start adding furniture and general clutter. The plan is to make the straightforward furniture, i.e. the bits that can be made out of flat planes, out of balsa, as I really enjoy doing this sort of construction. The bits with lots of awkward little details I'll 3D model and print. As you can see, I'm back to using tacky glue. I really can't decide what I prefer, tacky glue or super glue. I really want to try balsa cement. It's on order, but when will it arrive? Like everything else, I'm building this corner cabinet without any real plans. I'm just looking at the stills from the film, making some basic measurements and winging it. This is very easily done in balsa, as I can easily cut bits out, stick bits on, adjust things. It's a very forgiving material. And a quick time lapse for the shelving unit thing in the background. Pretty much the same construction as the corner cabinet, just this one's even simpler, as I didn't have the 45-degree angle to deal with. Plus you may notice I'm only using sheet material, basically because that's all I've got, and it's not really necessary to go and buy strip material of a precise dimension. You can just cut those bits from the sheet you already have. Actually, I think it might be a good idea to time lapse the rest of the balsa furniture. I was going to not bother showing the rest of the furniture as it's built in exactly the same way as the first one, but maybe you'd like to see it all, albeit hyperspeed. As you can see, I'm taking a while to cut a round hole into the tabletop. This I never needed to do, as I thought the tabletop had a kind of round basin set into it. The film stills are very blurry, but I've since realised it's not a round bowl, it's a round dish on one end of a set of scales. So I'll have to cover that up at some point and make the scales. Phew, nearly there. It's been quite a marathon building all these balsa furniture items. But it really is fun. I thoroughly recommend you give it a go. This really does give me an appreciation for people who build doll's house furniture. I'm using a similar scale, 1/15, whereas doll's houses are typically 1/12. But I'm using balsa, which is easy to cut and shape. This would be no good for a doll's house, as it's not tough enough. It wouldn't stand being picked up and thrown around a bit. So the doll's house furniture makers need to use a much harder wood, which would be a lot harder to work, I'd guess. Maybe I should try it. Look, the balsa cement arrived just after I finished building the balsa furniture. Brilliant. All the furniture I've just built seems to be made of the same wood, which to me looks like mahogany. And a really good thing about the balsa is it takes an acrylic wash really well. You need to mix up a darker, more saturated colour than what you want to end up with, as it soaks into the wood quite a way, toning everything down. The exception to the mahogany colour is the staging for the plants. That's been painted a simple white. Looking at it, the colour needs to be a little bit darker and less red, so I'm just going to wash and black over the whole thing. A bit of lighter colour dry brushing to pick out the edges and details, and I can call the main furniture done. In the film, The tiled floor is very dusty and scuffed, so I'm going to cover it in PVA glue and then sprinkle some Fuller's Earth over the whole thing, and that should do it. The windows are going to need some snow frosting on them, so I can't leave them open. So I've got some thin acetate and I'm just going to simply stick that on the outside. For the fake snow frosting, I've just got some white oil paint, as that sticks to just about everything. And I'm taking an old brush and just stippling it on and general blending it. What I need to do now is fill the room up with clutter and the more complicated furniture items, so this is a job for the 3D printer. In the film set there's a lot of glassware. The set designers obviously had a large collection of chemistry stuff on offer, so they filled it with that for some reason. I hit an immediate problem. The flasks have filled up with uncured resin. It won't drain out and I can't even suck it out with a syringe. I'll leave that problem for another day and start printing the stuff that doesn't need to be transparent. There's a lot of small parts here, so I start painting them right from the get-go, and I'm seeing if it's okay to paint acrylic directly onto the resin without a primer. And it works okay, but I do think a primed surface is nicer to paint on. I decided it's going to be easier to add the items to the furniture before I've actually glued the furniture in place. And very conveniently, I've got some books left over from my Wizard Room project. After multiple failures with the transparent chemistry ware, I was going to give up and print them all solid and paint some colour on the outside of the back half and hope that might give the illusion of liquid filled bottles and stuff. And it slightly worked, but literally half an hour after doing that, the wonderful YouTube channel Nerdforge came out with a video with a solution to the same problem. I couldn't believe it, and their solution was to make the bottles hollow from the bottom, so that means it has a wide opening for the resin, the uncured resin, to pour out, and then you can colour up some UV cured resin, pour that into the bottom, make it solid with a UV light, and the illusion of a half-filled bottle comes out perfect. I doubt they're listening, but if they are, I am so grateful for your channel. We now have a 3D modelling, printing and painting marathon, so I have to get in the zone, put on a podcast and just do it. I'm using my super simple standard technique of base coating with a slightly darker colour and then dry brushing some highlights over the top. Nothing fancy, but it's really quick and looks fine at a distance. Now, one thing I've never shown on this channel is me actually doing the 3D modelling. This is mainly because there's thousands and thousands of modelling videos out there, and these build videos are already quite long, so I thought there's no real point in doing it. But I don't know, what do you guys think? Should I show some modelling, 3D modelling, or just leave it to the channels that are dedicated for that sort of thing where you can get a more in-depth look? Please comment below. And now for the really satisfying part, or at least the beginning of, and that's filling up the room with all the elements I've been building, gluing them permanently in place, and for the first time getting a really good idea of what the whole thing's going to end up looking like. I've still got things to make, and the most challenging will be the plants that sit on the staging I'm just putting in place. I still haven't decided what to make them out of. Do I go with paper or very thin metal? It's the one thing that's constantly going through my mind at the moment. I almost forgot I've got to fix the desk with a hole in it, so just simply cut a sheet to size and glue it on. Then I've got a couple of crates that I've got to make out of balsa, and I've got the balsa cement, yay! But I was a little disappointed. The drying time was about the same as the tacky glue, and this glue was totally odourless. I remember when I was a kid, balsa cement having a huge strong smell, so it's obviously different in some way, and I'm thinking not as good. Now I'm back to installing all the bits and pieces. The scales are going to need a bit of assembly. That involves hanging the dishes, the pans, with some incredibly tiny chain I've got. Very fiddly. I keep shuffling around the position of the time machine and the bits and pieces in the foreground. It's very difficult looking at the film to work out exactly how everything's positioned, but I think I'll get near enough. I'm possibly leaving the most difficult bit to last, which is never a good idea, but it's the plants. And I have decided to laser cut the leaf shapes out of 0.05mm, or is it 0.005mm? No, it's 0.05. Very thin, whatever. The reason is it can be very thin, but still be very strong, and you can bend the metal afterwards into all kinds of shapes. And to help with the posability and strength, I glue a length of florist wire down the centre of the leaf. All the leaves get a spray of yellow primer. I thought that's a good base colour. And then I stick some putty in the bottom of the flower pots and do a bit of flower arranging. When it's all in position, I've got some dried coffee grounds I've had for quite a long time now. I'll finally get to use, as it makes the perfect fake soil. To finish off, the leaves need painting, plus some of the plants have flowers. I found a packet of these little flowers on eBay. No idea what they're made of, but when I painted them with just acrylic paint, they did start to go soft and melt a bit. Not enough to ruin it, but very strange. Just need to fix the plants into their final positions, and we're almost done. The final thing to do is add a little pile of plans onto the writing desk. So I printed out some nonsense machinery pictures, and I thought the paper was far too thick to look scale, so I separated the layers and got the sheets of paper as thin as possible. And now for the final look. Thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll try not to take so long to get the next one up. Goodbye.